Welcome to the webinar as you're starting to file into the area. My name is Julie LaRufa. I'm going to be one of your speakers today, and we're going to have folks go through and answer the poll. We'll talk a little bit about the results of that in just a moment. But we could probably go and talk through the housekeeping items. So the webinar, as you probably know, will be recorded, and so we'll email that out to you. We do have the chat turned off today, folks, but we do offer Q&A, which is at the bottom of your screen. So please feel free to ask your questions in there. We have a section of the webinar at the end where we'll take the questions and answer all of the questions that we have time for today, and then respond to questions that we do not have time for today. So we also have a survey that we are going to send out. So we'd love to get your feedback on today's webinar. So if you could fill that out, we'd really appreciate it. And then the last piece is kind of fun. So we have an event coming up in Chicago that we're co-hosting with Caterpillar and Workday. It's at the Chicago House of Blues, and we're going to provide more information. So if anybody's in the Chicago area, please, we're going to send out a registration link to that, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a bit. All right, so I think the poll has closed, and I'm going to talk through the top 3 answers. Okay, so this one's kind of interesting. So the most popular answer in the poll today was not realizing the complete Workday investment. That was the #1 answer. The second one was internal resources are busy on day-to-day operations. And then the last one is retention of internal talent. Okay, well, I think we have some pretty good ideas today that we're going to share with you that will hopefully address some of those concerns. So with that, again, thank you for joining us this morning for our topic today. I think that we're talking about how we can support you in your post-production environment. We're going to talk through the AMS model. And before we delve into that agenda, I do want to introduce you to our team. So I am Julie LaRufa, and with me is Yogi, and I would love it, Yogi, if you could introduce yourself.
Thanks, Julie. Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for tuning in today. I see the attendee numbers are slowly pouring in. So yeah, just a quick introduction about myself. So Yogi Bhushanraj, I'll be your speaker today. And again, I've been on the IT for 20 plus years, 15 of those with Cognizant, and come with an extensive AMS experience. I've played multiple roles, been in the delivery, solution, as well as sales. As a trusted consultant and a collaborative leader, I feel my strength is fostering the relationship both internally within Cognizant and on the client side, so that we can make the relationship work, and together we can get the goal, which is the client success, achieved, right? And again, I'll talk a little bit about interesting results on the polls, Julie. Thanks for sharing those. It jives well with the story we have. I'll talk more as and when I get to my part of the webinar, and I'll see how we can correlate some of those results that came in today with what we have in on the webinar content, right? So back to you, Julie.
Perfect, thank you. Wonderful. So as I mentioned earlier, my name is Julie LaRufa. I'm a client partner here at Cognizant. I have been in this space for almost 27 years. And at Cognizant, I have the honor and privilege of consulting with companies that are using Workday and evaluating our solutions that will help them to optimize their investment in Workday. So let's take a look at the agenda. So we're going to be walking through some client stories. Yogi's going to walk us through 3 specific use cases of clients that we have helped. We are also going to talk about the Q&A. I think I had mentioned at the end is where we're going to be able to like interact and have more of kind of like a back and forth Q&A. And then we'll go through a little bit of highlight on that event that I talked about. So with that, I think we can go and talk a little bit about the Cognizant Workday practice. So for those of you that aren't familiar, the Cognizant Workday practice, we were founded in 2007. At that time, our business was the first full deployment of Workday. So on HCM and FINS right out of the gate. And, you know, today we continue to use it throughout our business. We implement it obviously for our clients, and we have grown to be the third largest partner in the Workday ecosystem. And additionally, the top partner in post-production services, or AMS, which is what we're going to be talking about today. And as you can see, we have a lot of awards. We are very proud of all of that. And we think that this is really driven by three main areas. So the first one is around our people. We feel like we have the best people supporting our clients with the most experience in this space. We also have an incredible reputation for service with our 98% CSAT score. And I think the last reason that we continue to get these awards time after time is that we have a 100% successful deployment rate. So that's pretty unique, and it makes us very proud of the people that we have working on our team. So today we're really going to be focused on what happens once you go live and how we can support you. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Yogi, and he is going to share our service delivery models.
All right. Thanks, Julie. So just a little bit on to add context on the agenda that Julie shared earlier, right? So the way I want to do the next few minutes is I want to kind of open this up with some Workday trends, right? And also the client objectives. I'm really glad the top three results that came out of the survey, because that jives well with the trends that published trends as well. So we'll talk a little bit about that. We'll also talk a little bit about our Cognizant's AMS methodology, the solution methodology that is. And then we'll dive into the use cases that Julie alluded to, right? So I want to call them stories. So three unique stories. I wanted to drive, let's say, three things out of it, right? So one is, since I'm closely involved in all three of them, from solution as well as delivery, and my team is managing it as we speak. And all three of them are in flight, right? So I can speak to the details, double click, triple click if you have to, and be able to make more sense of it. So the first thing I want to get out of it is how in those three models, Cognizant was able to pivot to an operating model that is relevant for that client, right? And when I talk about it, you'll see that all three are different, right? The second one is, like I said, how we pivoted. We started off from a model we thought is going to be best for the client, but as we proceeded in the first few weeks, there were challenges, there were reasons for us to pivot one way or the other, right? And we were flexible enough to do that, right? And you'll see that coming up. The third one is the attitude, right? So I believe, I keep telling this to all my team, right? If you have the right attitude, it doesn't matter what skills you bring to the table. Skills are easily learned, right? Attitude is not. So the team that we have, at least in those three examples that I'm going to talk about, come with that culture, which is getting success for our client, right? And you'll see that coming off in those stories as well. All right, moving on. I want to start off from the top, right? And then again, AMS means probably more than one thing for a lot of you, right? So I want to kind of level set that for this conversation. Trust me, AMS has a bad rep as well, right? So in the sense, it's not sexy enough, right? So today is my attempt to correct that, and one webinar at a time, if I can, right? So at the high level, the post-production models are, right? So typically, when it comes to Workday, you know what, let me share this. When I was doing research for this webinar, right, the last few weeks or whatnot, there was just one article that stuck in my head, right? So they were comparing Workday implementation to a wedding. It was intriguing, right? So what they were saying is, okay, in order to get a wedding done, you need a lot of people, a lot of money, a lot of planning, right? And by the way, the actual wedding itself is not the goal, right? Successful marriages. Now, going with that analogy, getting Workday implemented itself is not success, right? Maintaining it for years to come is what success is, right? Made sense. So now, one of the things that probably most of you that tuned in today, if not all, on the Workday ecosystem is familiar when it comes to AMS is post-production models, right? It's probably purchasing a bucket of hours from your partner, right? And utilizing and leveraging them as you see fit, right? And again, that's very common. A lot of clients use it, nothing wrong with it, right? But there are big clients, especially when it comes to Cognizant. We deal with Fortune 500 clients as well, who have a lot of technologies in-house. And then again, Workday has started becoming complex, right? Initially, like what, 18 years ago, 19 years ago, when Workday came into the market as a new kid on the block, their selling point was, it is so easy and simple, your business users can manage it, you don't need a partner. Well, they were true for a long time, right? The last few years, I would say 6, 7 years, it started becoming complex because Workday in the last 18, 19 years started becoming a leader, at least on the HR space, right? So they started becoming complex. And especially when big organizations were trying to evolve their operating model, there are a lot of complexities that was involved, actually attune them to get work with partners, right? Because partners, as I said, come with specific certification for specific functional areas, or SKUs, as we call it in the Workday world, right? And having the right functional area expertise is paramount, because now, let's say if you are changing your partner for open enrollment, right? There are certain complexities that are involved in it, right? And again, especially if you're having thousands and thousands of employees who are going to be affected one way or the other with that change, you wanted to ensure that you do it right the first time, right? So having partners kind of participate in those events kind of helped us, right? Now, let's go to the production models. Like I said, the common production models that are out there is staff augmentation, right? Very common, and they are usually like short-term, just to replace an expert for a reason. Or the example that I gave, if there is an event that is happening in a particular year, you wanted to ensure that you leverage your partner to give you a couple of experts to come and help you to go through that period. And again, you go back to your internal team. Nothing wrong with that. The other model is co-sourced. What I mean by that is it's a combination of client resources as well as partner resources working together in tandem, right? And again, that works for a lot of clients because now they are able to utilize the experience, the leadership, and everything else the partner ecosystem is going to bring in, along with the travel knowledge that their internal team has, and work together and make magic happen, right? And the third one is AMS, right? So AMS, again, like I said, in the Workday world, it's post-production, but that's why I kind of wanted to give you a variation on that as well, right? So there is a dedicated model, right? So dedicated model is the one that I was talking about, where there is going to be named resources for the clients, right? And they're going to be in an operating model working along with the client resource. And there are various versions of that as well, right? You can completely outsource your entire operations ecosystem to your partner, right? I have clients who have done that. You'll see that in the example that I'm going to talk in a little bit. And there's also what we call as pool resources. Like I said, most of the Workday clients are very familiar with that model. In Cognizant, we call that a CVS, right? So continued value services. We'll give a bucket of hours, and the client is able to leverage those hours for their needs, right? So they come and create a ticket in our ecosystem and get work done, right? That works perfectly well for a lot of clients, nothing wrong with that, right? However, there are certain clients who are going to need that extra help, right? If they are looking for an SLA-driven outcome model, right? If they're looking for a partner to support multiple technologies, look at this scenario, right? So if you have Workday, as well as other technologies like, let's say, SAP, somebody could be having the entire HR ecosystem in Workday, and payroll could be in Oracle for all you know, right? But it's all under the single HR leader, right? Now, imagine a scenario when you have a partner who's able to support all of that together in a single operating model with a single governance, right? It's less headache for the client. Now they don't have to deal with with an Oracle partner and a Workday partner competing for who does what and whatnot, right? So that's where Cognizant is able to excel, right? When we are able, since we have all these practices beyond Workday, we are able to put that together and come and work in a single operating model, right? And then what I mean by hybrid is there is also an operating model where we have a combination of dedicated resource and the pool resources working in tandem, right? We want to ensure the experience that the client faces is seamless, right? What do I mean by that? You don't have to go create a ticket for the pool resources work versus a dedicated team work, right? What do I mean by that again, right? So in the dedicated model, one of the highlight is the team is going to be sitting in your ecosystem. They'll be using your ticketing system, they'll be using your tools, they'll be using your processes, right? So they will be part of your ITSM process. So when a ticket gets escalated to say L2 or whatnot, the Cognizant team is going to be part of that, pick that up and work on it, right? And if it's determined that this piece of work has to be done by a pool resources, the Cognizant Service Delivery Manager takes control of that. So the client does not have to make that decision. When do I pivot to a dedicated versus a non-dedicated model, right? So that's one of the views that I want to put in, right? So again, those are the things that I want to put up front so that you are able to appreciate the rest of the content, because it's going to be, like I said, AMS is more attuned to a dedicated operating model. And you see that unfold in the next few slides. Okay, I said that I'm going to talk about the Workday trends, right? And again, this is also attuned to the results, survey results that we saw that Julie read out moments ago, right? So if you look at it, I'm going to touch upon a couple of things here, right? So I spoke about how Workday evolved since 2007, right? How it became a lot more successful, but at the same time, a lot more complex, right? Why do you need a partner ecosystem working in tandem with you all to ensure that you get the investment out of Workday, right? And again, I talked about the best of breeds, right? How having a partner like Cognizant who supports multiple technologies, all housing under one operating model and one governance model, is going to help the clients be a lot more attuned to success, right? So we talked about that. And again, Agile is something that is getting uniformly accepted as a delivery model, right? So, and again, Workday releases to bi-yearly releases, right? Every year, right? And having the backlogs kind of accumulated and going through a Scrum cycle makes a lot more sense. And again, we have an operating model that would leverage as well as complement the agile methodology the client might already have, right? I have several examples of my client where they have an existing Scrum model, Scrum system, but they would use Workday in a completely different way because there is no synergies between them, right? And we can help with that, right? We can ensure that everything falls under one scope and one operating model. Workday talent, right? And again, you probably have read multitude of articles on the Workday talent gap, right? What do I mean by that? The supply versus the demand is not natural, right? So what do I mean by that? Like there is a lot more demand than what the supply is. This all goes back to the Workday way of doing things, right? So they are very controlled. There are only 48 post-production or AMS partners globally today, right? And again, you need to be certified in a particular SKU for you to be able to successfully implement something in a production environment, right? So there are a lot of restrictions and controls, right? Workday started realizing that in the last couple of years. You probably would have seen that they released Workday Basics, right, to everybody, right? You don't have to be a Workday partner to go through that. I believe it's like a 5 to 6 hour training program. And somebody with the Workday knowledge, they also release Beyond Basics, right? So Workday is realizing it and trying to slowly expand the supply so that the client feels their demands are being met, right? But again, as it is today, it is difficult for to manage the demand and supply together. All right, some of the objectives, right? Most of it I touched upon, right? I mean, the survey said ROI, not achieving the ROI is probably the top one on that, right? We talked about service models, how we can pivot with an operating model that is a combination of a lot of different technologies. One of the survey results said that the internal talent, right? So it's so focused on their day-to-day operations, they do not have the bandwidth to realize any of the backlogs, right? I have several examples like that, right? But I speak to my client and they say, my internal team is so much focused on the day-to-day work, I'm not able to get the investment out of Workday. How can Cognizant help with that, right? So there are scenarios where we have taken ownership of the operation item completely soup to nuts, right? Giving that bandwidth back to the client so that their team is able to do those backlogs, get the enhancements done, right? And be more fruitful and successful on their Workday journey. Again, we did talk about the continuous year innovation, right? So in an AMS model, something that Cognizant does, we give like a multi-year model, right? So the idea is as we go from year on year, what are the productivity gains that we get, right? How can we ensure that we pass those efficiencies back to our client, right? You'll see those coming up in the stories that I'm going to tell you later, right? And obviously focus more on business outcomes, right? It actually helps a client to be on an operating model to be able to get that business outcomes done, right? And again, I'll give you a lot more visual examples as we move along. All right, so let me give a little bit of a deeper understanding of what is that Cognizant AMS offering is all about, right? I probably want to mention a couple of things here, right? So what is our unique value proposition, right? What is our solution methodology? How is that we are able to pivot to the client's need, not just one time, but in succession, right? So let me talk through this, right? Well, this slide attests to the considerations, right? So what is the service model, delivery model considerations, right? Why do I need this? Probably the first one is not something that might be relevant for a client who's just going live in Workday because they wouldn't have any volumetrics to go back for reference, right? But if you're already in a Workday environment, in a Workday install, probably you are having Workday tickets getting generated on a regular basis, right? So we probably want to understand the volumetrics of those, right? If you are going on a fresh install, we have the experience and ability to be able to help you with the solutioning on that, right? With the rest of the answers, which talks about complexity, right? Usually the way I've seen on fresh installs is when a client goes live with their Workday ecosystem, right after hypercare, there's going to be a deluge of tickets, right? But it's slowly going to taper down, right? Usually, depending on their ecosystem, if they have a very complex integration ecosystem, what do I mean by that? If there are a lot of upstream and downstream systems that are competing to give and take data out of Workday, that's going to increase the integration complexity, right? So you probably would see a lot of integration tickets coming right off the bat, right? But as you get mature in that journey, you will probably start seeing more functional tickets coming in, right? Now that your your end users are getting slowly acclimated to your Workday functionality. Now they understand what are the different things that can be done. They are probably going to ask for more, right? So that's how a typical trend that I've seen. But again, the complexity is going to help us even without any volumetrics for us to be able to size for you. Coverage. What do I mean by that? Well, coverage doesn't play a whole lot if you're using a pooled resources, right? The CVS model that I talked about. Meaning, usually you are looking for coverage during your time, right? Eastern or Pacific or MER, whatever your global time is. But when it comes to AMS dedicated model, now you can determine what kind of coverage you want, right? Do you want 16 bar 5, right? We have an onshore offshore team working following the Sun model so that you are able to apportion the work, be it incidents or service requests or CRs in a fashion so that you are able to get more work done. And also having the offshore and onshore working in tandem in a model, it's also going to be cost effective for you on the long run, right? So that's why we want to understand what is the coverage is all about. We talked about the operating model, right? It could be a combination of pooled resources and dedicated. It could be a combination of partner as well as client and multiple variations, right? And we can pivot whatever works for the client. And obviously the budget consideration. So we need to probably understand what is your Workday roadmap is, right? Are there any SKUs that are in consideration in the next few quarters or months or whatever, right? So based on that, we would ensure that we have the right delivery model to be able to consistently and continuously support you. All right, moving on. You saw those 5 bullet items, right? So now, and again, I have a Word document of it, like the 12 or 15 questions as well. So it's easy, more palatable for your responses. But I just want to give you a view. What am I going to do with all those responses, right? The right-hand side of your screen is what we'll be able to do, right? So we can model this anyway from a dedicated source model for a specific SKU, for a specific attribute of your ecosystem, or we can go all the way up where we can completely own your Workday ecosystem operations, that is, so that we give back those bandwidth to your team so that they can do a lot more enhancements work and backlogs and things like that. We can also help you with that, right? So there are multiple different combinations. So depending on your need, depending on your responses, we can pivot. We can start with something like a task-based delivery and slowly go up, right? And again, we can pivot and be flexible in however it's going to work for you, right? For your success. All right. I probably want to spend a minute or two on this one, right? So I was going on and on about our operating model and how is it different and whatnot, right? So this speaks to why Cognizant operating model is unique and different, right? So I usually tell this to my client, right? So Cognizant, most of you tuned in today probably know this. It's a $27 billion company, right? Half of our revenue is coming from AMS clients, right? And we've been so successful at it for so many years. We have all these automation tools, processes, and a lot of different values that we have brought in for our clients, especially on the post-production space. And when we acquired our Workday acquisition, it was a perfect marriage where we were like, okay, Cognizant is so good at doing AMS methodology using all the solution variants. How can we marry that to the Workday world and create this unique proposition, which is going to help our clients who are struggling to get that model in play, right? You probably are familiar. Some of you tune in today probably are having Workday managed by your business teams. Nothing wrong with that. That's how Workday started off, right? Like I said earlier in my conversation. But there are specific clients who are typically big clients, huge clients, who want the entire Workday operations to be done on the IT side, right? Nothing wrong with that either. But the idea is, if you have a structured solution methodology, there is a scope for you to get better as you go along, right? And that's what this slide talks to, right? Eliminate. What do I mean by that? We want to ensure when our team is trying to resolve the tickets, if the same issue coming again and again, they want to ensure that issue stops occurring, right? You could have a job aid created. You shift left it to the help desk. You ensure that you provide documentation so that the end users are able to ensure that those tickets are not getting created in the first place. I'll give you an example, right? So somebody wants to log into, and understand what is their a comp value for and again, maybe that's a bad example. So let's take a simple example, right? Somebody wants to go and ensure that their timesheet for their project is getting approved to the proper workflow, right? And they do not know how to get that done because Workday is new for them, right? So Workday time module, now they go in and they don't know what screen to manure, right? So they're creating a ticket to ensure that they are mapped to the right time code, right? Now you get tickets one after the other for the same issue, right? But this could be resolved for all the time by creating a job aid, clearly articulating how you map your time code and what are the screens you navigate for you to be able to successfully submit time, right? So this is going to eliminate the ticket altogether. And again, if we cannot eliminate, we want to automate it, right? Industrialize. What do I mean by that? This is to ensure, especially when there are multiple technologies, and I gave you a scenario of something is being handled by the business team, something is handled by the IT teams. There are different ways of standardization, right? We want to ensure there's commonality there, right? So bringing those standardization together so it's industrialized, so it's common across. Everybody follows the same release window. Everybody follows the same methodology when it comes to approval and whatnot. Synergize. So what does that mean, right? So synergize is when, and again, taking it up one more level, right? We want to ensure that the multiple technologies, the example that I gave you earlier, right? If payroll is handled by a non-Workday technology, right? How do you ensure they are all getting synergized together, right? So when one system is releasing something, how does the other system ensure that it doesn't get affected positively or negatively, right? So that's where the synergize comes into play. By doing all of that, you transform the client system, right? And again, the operating model gets to a targeted operating model where the client is able to completely start realizing their Workday benefits. And the representative operating model, right? So I'll take a moment on this one. And again, this is a very simple, I know it's an eye chart, apologize for that. But look at it, if you look at the right-hand side of your screen, right? This kind of gives you a view of how the tickets are flowing from top to bottom, right? Typically, we have seen there is this service desk, which most cases the client owns, right? And something that doesn't get resolved by them, it goes through the ITSM process, right? So Cognizant, like I said earlier, could pivot to multiple different models, right? There are examples where we completely take over the L2 side of the house, right? So that frees up the bandwidth so the customer is able to utilize their internal team in order to get the backlogs and the enhancements done, right? Some of them classified as L3, some of them could be projects, which could be L4 and whatnot, right? There are times where customer outsource even the L3 work to us, right? So we can take the entire Workday ecosystem and be able to help you, right? I'll give you an example when I'm telling you the use case stories on how some of those aspects were taken into account for a customer when they did not have an internal team to be able to support all this, right? And again, on top of it, like I said, Cognizant brings in all these tools and accelerators, which helps us to be more focused on getting things done. To the previous slide that I talked about, eliminate, automate, industrialize, synergize, and help you transform into a model where you are trying to invest more and more from your Workday platform, right? Going back to the wedding analogy that I gave, right? Unless and until you have a successful marriage over years and years, it doesn't attune to all the fancy weddings you had, right? So unless and until you are able to get the investment from Workday, the implementation planning, all the months and years spent with your implementation partner, getting it into a production, doesn't make a whole lot of sense unless and until you are getting that, getting the investment out of it, right? All right, how am I doing on time? So, okay. All right.
Good. You're doing good.
All right, wonderful. Thanks, Julie. All right, so I know this is an eye chart, so bear with me, right? So the intent is not for you to read through the slide. The intent is to kind of give you all the information that would be pertinent to the story I'm going to tell you now, right? Like I said earlier, this is one of those 3 stories, right? So the idea behind this is to kind of give you an idea on how Cognizant is able to help this client who were outsourcing for the first time. I'll tell a little bit about this client, right? I'm not going to name names, right? It's a cloud-born client with about 70,000 plus employees, right? They did a re-implementation of their HR ecosystem a few months back, okay? The reason they did that is because they have a huge internal team, right? But they went live with Workday long ago. And over a period of time, they realized they grew as a company, they grew as an organization. However, the install that they had was not attuned to their success, right? So they decided to do a re-implementation. While they did that, they also decided that they probably need a Workday partner to come in and help them with their operational needs, right? On top of it, they also made a decision that they're going to invest more on Workday. Now they are getting implemented on their finance for Workday as well, right? So you saw their HCM landscape, right? Apologize. When I got invited to this conversation like late last year, so I had this conversation with the client, right? So try and understand how we can help for them to support their re-implemented ecosystem. They had a backlog which is mile long. Their internal team is, and again, it goes back to one of the survey results. They were so focused on getting the operation items done, it was difficult to free up their bandwidth to get some of the backlogs done. On top of it, I mentioned that Workday is becoming complex. So they also needed additional bandwidth from experts to help them with some of those attributes, right? So we did a co-solutioning, right? So we did multiple workshops to understand what would work for this client. We zeroed on an operating model, right? So we kind of decided, okay, we'll do an operations team, which is more of L2, and we'll also do a build team or a development team, which is L3, right? So now the L3 team is going to be focused more on getting the backlogs and the development work done on a consistent basis. They are in a Scrum methodology, right? So there are daily calls, the DSUs, right? While in the L2 side, it's more operational driven. And again, it is 24/7 shop, right? It's a global company. So we started this off, right? We started this journey. We just got off transition. The challenges that we started facing. Remember I told you these are the first time outsourcer, even though they have outsourced other technologies, but for Workday, they're never outsourced, right? It's always been an internal technology, right? So the team was supporting it. So now, with the Cognizant team taking operations, there were sheer panic, right? I mean, and again, to be transparent, they also had this feeling, okay, what am I going to do now? What does it mean? So am I giving my work to Cognizant? So am I going to lose my job? Or is Cognizant, and they also started feeling that there are experts, very specific experts coming from Cognizant. So they are like, okay, so should I share information should I consider them as part of my team? Are they staff aug resource? Are they going to go away? So a lot of questions, right? Kudos to my client. So she was able to consistently pass that message time and again to her team and ensure that Cognizant is here to help them reach the goal, right? Yes, they are coming in with experience and expertise, but they're going to learn from you, right? Because they don't know the internal process. You're going to learn from them. And together, as a collaborative team, we are going to reach success, right? And again, we are still in the middle of that. And again, I'm glad to report we are getting a lot better, right? The attitude and the camaraderie changed in the last few months, right? So my team and the client team are working together as a single team, and they're able to exchange ideas, information, and they're able to see and utilize the thought leadership that my team is able to bring in on board, right? So that's a model. Again, the reason I wanted to showcase this is I'm sure some of you tuned in today are going to listen to this webinar as a recording, might have challenges like that, right? You might have had an internal team invested, but they probably do not have this specific knowledge of a specific functional area, right? We can provide you that help, right? And work together in a co-source model and be part of a single operating model and help you drive this as a common team, right? So that's what I wanted to drive from this particular slide. All right, let's go to the second one, right? So this one is, again, it's an interesting story. It's a community college, right? So I was speaking to the CIO last year. So he had he started off like this, right? So he said, okay, Yogi, I have a problem. I'm losing my internal team one after the other. And I'm at a point where I need help, right? So can you give me staff aug, right? And he was saying, my internal team comes in, they get trained on their on the tenant, they understand Workday, now they get poached by other service partners, or they go to another client, right? And it's like, this is like a cycle, vicious cycle, right? And can Cognizant give me a couple of staff aug resources so I can have a breather and while I go hire more people? I said, yes, I can do that. But are you open for another suggestion, right? How about I give you an operating model with a combination of a dedicated team as well as pool resources? We're going to do a couple of things. One is we're going to ensure that we work with your business team consistently, set up the ITSM process, ensure we kind of give them the view of what is the experience that they're going to have from IT, which is the CIO's team, on a consistent basis, right? Secondly, we will empower your help desk. So they're not just taking a call and passing it over to the IT team, but they are able to solve some of the Workday tickets themselves. And we can do that by creating job aids. We can ensure that we provide documentation for solving simple tickets, right? He was like, he took me up on that, and like 8 months now in the journey, I visited him a few weeks back. So we are at a point. So one of the things that we did was, and he said, okay, I hired few folks now, right? And the good news is these are fresh college graduates with a penchant to learn Workday, understand the Workday world and whatnot. My team over the last few months has been positioning them, training them in Workday simple tickets and helping them solve, right? Now we are at a point where the CIO is like, okay, Yogi, after this 12-month contract, I probably think we should be able to be self-sufficient with a skinny down model, right? I'm like, perfect. Now he's able to realize the promise I gave him last year, right? So you got a breather. Think back his recruitment strategy rather than go hiring senior folks and training them on Workday and losing them to competition or other partners. Now he was able to revise his recruiting strategy, bring in fresh blood who have a penchant to learn, and they're going to stay a little longer right? And giving Cognizant an opportunity to train them. And now he's at a point where these folks are able to handle all those simple tickets. And by the way, over the period of time, we were able to ensure all the business folks have the ability to understand what the experience is all about. They understand the ITSM, right? And things are looking better. All right, I got one more story to tell, then I'll open up for questions. Again, this is another unique story, another educational institution. But this guy, this particular client is a lot different from the previous one, right? So they made a strategic decision that they do not want to spend on their IT team, on their internal IT team, that is. However, they would want to utilize the dollars and refund it back to some of the other initiatives like getting a new platform. And they wanted to understand from Cognizant whether we can take over, be their IT team, IT as a service, and help them through this journey, right? So this was interesting, right? And again, we started off and my team had to pivot multiple different ways in order to continuously and consistently work with this client. And our operating model has swayed multiple different ways, right? So one of the challenges that I started seeing in this client was that business teams started panicking, right? Because they don't know what they don't know. They had this the layer of IT team supporting them all along for years, and all of a sudden they lost them, right? It's like you pull carpet off somebody's feet, right? So they are like, okay, what does this mean? Is Cognizant going to be my IT team? They are not here. They're not sitting in my, I cannot go visit them. They're not sitting in those IT rooms. So how do I ensure that they are able to help me out, right? So we were getting deluge of tickets, right? Everything was a P1 issue, everything, even though the definition doesn't cut it, right? So we had to take them in multiple different scenarios, right? We had to calm them down, right? We wanted to slowly take them to the process. We cannot be rigid. We cannot throw process book at them, right? We wanted to ensure that we work with them, give them, empathize with the business leaders, understand how we can prioritize their needs, right? So my team ran multiple workshops where we were prioritizing their needs in each of those pillars, HCM, finance, and student. And we understand student is the only revenue generating pillar of those. So we ensure that there are proper priorities that are being drawn, and we are making sure there are a lot of communication going back and forth, right? We are making sure there's transparency. And believe it or not, there are some missteps, right, or bad practices. Like the previous IT team, they were helping the business users for everything, like creating reports, right? You probably all know who tuned in today. One of the selling point for Workday is it empowers the business users. They would be able to run some of the reports themselves. They do not need no IT to help them, right? However, this particular team wasn't familiar with that model because they've been spoon-fed by their team. So to kind of do the change management for them, it took us a while. But we are at a place where I'm seeing light at the end of the tunnel, right? So we are, like I said, we pivoted multiple different ways. And kudos to the client as well as kudos to my team. We were able to get this to a model where now they understand the processes, they understand the classification of tickets, they understand why certain thing is an incident versus what is a CR, how things could be prioritized and whatnot, right? So, and again, that was the last story I wanted to share. Thank you so much for your time and listening to me patiently. I want to say one thing before I turn it over to Julie. And again, I probably mentioned this during my introduction. One of the things I love about my job is solving these unique issues for our clients, right? So please feel free to ask any questions, and I'll be more than happy to help you with that. Back to you, Julie.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing all those stories about your clients, Yogi. This is really helpful. All right, let me check and see what we have in here for questions. Okay, first up, question: how is governance managed in a hybrid model using both internal resources and dedicated resources from Cognizant? Good question.
So let me understand the question first. So is it all partner, or is it a combination of client as well as partner?
Yeah, it's like, how do we partner together? Like, where does the internal resources of the client and where do the dedicated resources from Cognizant begin? So how does the
Perfect.
grid model work?
And that's a good question, right? So in an operating model where we have multiple different towers, multiple different layers, right? I showcased in one of the examples that how there is a single governance, right? Where the SDM is making a decision for the client, when should they leverage a pool resources, or CVS and Cognizant's term, and dedicated team, right? So it's a unilateral experience for the client where the client doesn't have to make that decision, right? Depending on how we modeled it, the SDM makes a decision and get this taken care, and the governance is together, right? So it's a singular team.
All right, thank you for that. Let's see, do we have anything else? Yep, next question, Yogi. This one is, my internal Workday team consists of only 2 people. Their skill sets are still early stages and minimal. I feel like our team needs at least 3 or 4 people and should contain more experience. How would your AMS model be able to support a situation like this?
Well, that's a good question, right? So this goes back to the second story, right? So yes, we can, and then again, it all depends on what your end goal is. Is your end goal wanted to grow your internal team, have that seed team in place so that the client wants to become self-sufficient, or they wanted to kind of make this demarcation on, okay, I'm moving operations under partner and I'm keeping all the enhancements, right? So it could be depending on what your goal is, but Cognizant can bring in an AMS model with the resource needs that is, and then I mentioned about the questionnaire, right? So if you get the responses, we will be able to solution that for you and give you a model with dedicated and pooled based on your need, and whatever your end objective is, based on that, we can pivot.
All right. It sounds like that answers the question there. Thank you. Let's see, what else do we have? Okay, here's one. What happens if the scope or resource requirements change in the middle of a contract? How would we accommodate more or less resources?
Well, that's a very good question. So let me take you back to this slide. Probably I didn't mention this when I was talking about story 2. So if you see on the lower side where I'm seeing the cursor, right? So check-in phase in the middle of the contract to review and adjust size. So this is a solution pivot that we did for this particular client. And now we are doing this for a lot of these clients, especially the ones where they don't know what they don't know, right? So we wanted to kind of give them the ability to sign a long-term contract, which is at least a 12-month contract, so that they are able to get a discounted price. At the same time, we also give them the ability to kind of have a check-in phase in the middle, right? So what this does is we are able to have this conversation with empirical data. What do I mean by that? Over the middle of the contract, we would have gathered some intel about what tickets are showing up. How is our culture, Cognizant culture, working with them? How is their business teams reacting to us? Vice versa, right? So there are a good amount of information and intel that is gathered over a period of time. And now we can make a decision. The decision could be multi-fold, right? Okay, we are doing good. Let's keep doing it for the next 6 months. Or, okay, I see we haven't utilized a lot of Cognizant team the last 3 months. I see there is a decline in usage for these tickets. And that might be a good reason for that, right? So they can say, why don't we reduce those functional areas, and we can do a negative change order. Or that could be, okay, I see a lot of activities on a particular SKU, but Cognizant has presence on other SKUs where there are no activities at all. So we can reduce that and bump this up. So there are multiple different variations that can come out of the check-in phase, and based on that, we can pivot, right? So that's a good question. So it's particularly true in the educational higher ed field, where traditional organization, they are very controlled on what they wanted to do. So kind of giving them that option and opportunity to go and course correct kind of helps them.
Awesome. Good stuff. Okay, I have one final question and then we'll talk a little bit more about the Chicago event. So this last question is, how does Cognizant manage unforeseen attrition, mainly of named resources on a dedicated model?
Well, that's a good question, right? And then again, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. So attrition happens everywhere, especially when it comes to Workday, right? So Workday is so niche, and again, most of you tuned in today, and people are going to hear this recording, very familiar with that, right? I talked about the talent gap, right? So there's always an opportunity for a Workday resource. They're good at what they're doing. They're going to be wooed in for another opportunity, right? Cognizant understands that. And that's a reason in our operating model, we always ensure there is a buffer layer that we bring in. And that's an investment, right? And that goes back to the very first story I was telling, right? Where we want to ensure that there is a buffer layer shadowing the team, having the access. The client doesn't pay for the resources, right? And if an unforeseen attrition happens, right? Now we have a resource with access who can take it up, right? Who can take it up, and there is no time lost in getting them onboarded and all of those things, right? So, I mean, we pivot in that way, right? That's a most, I would say, ideal world. But there are occasions where in the middle of something very important, we lose an important resource, right? Cognizant, as Julie, you covered that slide, right? We have like what, 1,700 consultants certified. So we have a good amount of pool. We consistently hire people, right? We can go dip on them. We can use our pool resources as a model, leverage that, get that help done at that time, right? So there are a couple of different ways we can pivot.
Awesome. Cool. That was our last question. So I'd love to just take a second and highlight the Chicago event again. That is the Rock Stars of Manufacturing. It's the 11th of June, and we have a speaker from Caterpillar that's attending with Workday, and we're really excited about this event. So the registration for that is in the chat, and we would love to see many of these faces at that event. I also just want to take a quick second. Thank you so much, Yogi, for highlighting all of the ways that we're able to help our clients. I think this is a really exciting time to be at Cognizant in the Workday practice, and also a really exciting time to be a Workday client. So thank you everyone who has attended today. We really appreciate your time. I know you could be doing a lot of other things. So thank you so much. And we will be sending out the recording to folks that have not attended. So thanks again. Anything else?
No, thanks, Julie. I appreciate the opportunity. And like I said, AMS has a bad rep, and I'm trying to clear that one webinar at a time, right? So hopefully this changes something. All right.
It's a man's charge, right?
Yeah.
Awesome.
All right.
Thank you so much, everyone.